Wonderful. Thank you very much, everybody, all of you, for joining the Be Women Weekly Dialogues, our webinars to share, learn about leadership and get inspired to action, because that's what Be Women is all about, action to make changes. So I'm Laura Jadoru, coach, founder of Be Women, passionate about the B Corp movement. As many know, I live and breathe sustainability and using business as a force for good. So before we get started, let me share a few words about who we are, Be Women. Be Women, we are a global network, huge now, might be 600 women, passionate entrepreneurs that seek to balance purpose and profit in the markets. We want to really move from a traditional market of profits to the triple bottom line, but we want to really get to the care economy where everybody cares for, we're caring for the people and the planet are what matters most. And we women call each other imaginal selves, because we are all imaginal cells that are, and imaginal cells are in nature. And as in every meeting we talk about it, because what we believe is that we have to follow this idea that, like cells, with a deep cooperation and understanding and how these imaginal cells create the butterfly, we really are going to create the most amazing world together. So in the next 50 minutes, you will be absolutely inspired by our guest speaker, Heidi Dangelmeier, and the topic of today is driving financial growth and human evolution beyond male-made tools. And Heidi is a PhD in Princeton and founder of Girl Approve. And our moderator, our wonderful moderator, is Laura Schwieterman. She is global head of innovation and growth from the company Bayer. So Laura, I let you on the stage.
Terrific. Good morning, everyone. I am happy to introduce our speaker for today, Heidi. You heard a little bit about it from the other Laura already, but I'm just going to tell you a little bit more. Heidi is an inventor and a designer and a scientist, but interestingly, she has her roots in engineering, which is a beautiful combination of skills that has led to some really profound learning in the space of science and human intelligence, and that's what we're going to hear a bit more about today. She's an expert in tipping points for disruptive growth, and she has brought first-to-market products in over 20-plus industries. So she has a lot of experience inventing things for new markets that have delivered explosive growth in business. She's widely publicized, a couple of the places, New York Times and the New Yorker and et cetera. But what we're going to hear a lot about today is her Girl Approved experiment that just wrapped, which was about a 12-year experiment with over 2,500 girls, where there was a really profound and unearthed some new, well, not necessarily new, but now understood level of human intelligence. And it's really through this intelligence that we're going to learn about new tools to use our minds for cultural engineering and economic growth. And so this work most recently won the MIT Award, Future of AI Award. So it's definitely getting some attention. It's really, like I said earlier, it's quite profound. I think you all are going to really enjoy hearing what she's learned and how it applies to our lives as humans, as professionals, and even as mothers. I would say that that's an important contribution too. So with that, I will pass it over to you, Heidi, to take it from here.
All right, so Laura, and I want, this is going to be a conversation with Laura as opposed to me just blathering on. But first, let me share something on my screen and share that screen, and let's do that play for a second. All righty. All right, so GIRLSMART School of Brains. Note here that there is a plural, and it says it ain't smart if it's not girl smart. So this is sort of my pre-intro before we get to this. So this is my opening statement. So what I'm going to talk about is who owns the concept of smart. And really what I'm getting at is truth. And when I say truth or intelligence, I'm talking about the driving belief systems that form everything from science to the trajectory of human development, what we're taught at school as very important information, and where all of this talk about power with women, what the larger thing than power is intelligence. So if you're looking at what drives any sort of power or shared respect, it's not some sheer like raw concept of control. It really is those people who've owned the concept of what is truthful and smart. And sadly, that's not women. Hasn't been. And that's really important. And what I'm going to really talk about today is that if we as women do not own our brain, we are owned. And by owned, I mean that we are not independent, thinking, free people, a free gender who is self-determining their potential, their aspirations. And a lot of what this talk is going to reveal is how we are really owned. And we're going to be owned because we haven't really fully owned our mind, and we haven't really fully owned or really driven any of the real concept of what is intelligent or any of the belief systems that have created the world as we know it. And what would happen if this was the case, which we're going to go through? What would happen if women fully owned that which we were given? Not that the capacities and the talents and the amount of information and the perception we were told we have by whoever controls the concept of smart. I'm talking for real, as defined by Mother Nature at birth. If women owned our cognitive, perceptual, linguistic, prophetic skills, what would happen in this world? Every problem we know could be solved. Okay, so remember this concept of Eden, like a place where things were all in balance? Well, that really relates a lot to what happens when women own what our minds are truly capable of. So this is why we're having this talk. There's a potential in women and there's a potential in all things, but it's going to relate to how we use our brain and the concept of smart. So we're going to introduce a new concept of smart, which I'll call GIRLSMART, just to differentiate it from the smarts as we know. And then I really want to emphasize in this is that saving the future and as we know it is going to really require radical redefinition of the concept of what is smart. And if that happens, you really reboot human nature. And that's why I call it like brain school. So that is sort of a warm up of what we're going to be addressing today. And this is fundamentally different than just, girl empowerment or girl power. It's really about what has the beliefs, the tools, the vocabulary, the knowledge of nature that has created the modern world as we know it, or culture as we know it. All right, so back to Laura.
Okay, so Heidi, you in the invitation to this webinar, you called this a rally cry. So it's not really a talk, but it's a rally cry. Just talk to us a little bit about, what's the difference and what you're really hoping to achieve today.
Okay. All right. A rally cry, which is, today, everywhere we go listen to a TED Talk, and we're listening, and then we go to some, executive program after school, and as women, we spend a lot of time listening and trying to acquire those little skills that are going to make us faster, or better, or more accomplished. And it's always like there's something out there bigger than us that we could acquire. And what I believe is, or what I see is that there's a lot of women with incredibly good intentions, but what we haven't had is the technologies that we need to solve the real problems that face us. So I think the difference between a rally cry and a TED Talk is I want to drill in that we all as women have internal technology. And if we learn to activate that and without learning anything else, it's not about memorizing somebody else's belief systems, that within us, what we end up proving is that by nature, we have the intelligence we need to solve these hard problems. And what I'd like this to do is be the first step in inviting women to know how to learn how to use their own instrument. So I feel like it's not about, I don't have any problem to solve, but I can, with the help of women like Laura and with a movement, activate which was already given to us as women. So we can be the next engineer. So, I feel like it's an invitation to stop seeking everybody else's opinion and realize that what has been missing all along was already in us all along. And we just need to resurface that. And so it's not about anyone's got the tools live within us. And so that's what I hope that this is the beginning of, is the beginning of women unifying and mobilizing our birthright as intelligent, creative people to pioneer a future, not fit into the one that exists. So what's your thought on that, Laura? Oh, Laura's not on. Oh, could you turn Laura on? Yeah, okay, yeah.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Okay. So it's the rally cry for women, for us to really kind of come forward with, the unique intelligence that we can bring to start to really shape and engineer culture and get us on the right direction. How are we doing so far? How are women doing? Do you feel like we're helping at this point, or is there much still for us to learn to figure out how we can really contribute versus potentially sabotage what our good intentions are?
Well, one of the things that is really upsetting to me, and which we're going to go through, is that, again, women have great intention, but the saddest thing that I'm seeing is that we're putting all our effort focusing on what men have done, as opposed to focus on what we are capable of. So my biggest fear right now is it is true that women have a vital role in saving the future. And in fact, I will say right now, men cannot do it, even if they'd love to. That saving the future is on our backs, all right? But this absolutely requires for us to stop comparing ourselves to men and having their constructs of what is possible define what is possible for us. So by seeing men as the idealization of power, we really sacrifice our own. And by seeing them as an idealization of what is knowable and creatable, we are surrendering that we are the creative force. So I'm very, very worried that if women don't get their act together, we are going to be the problem. Because within us is something that has been unharvested and desired by men for years. They call them the Grail codes. They are the codes of creation. And so right now, it's ironic that at the very time I finally cracked these codes after all these experiments, that women keep arguing about men and focusing on men, where men are trying to leave the paradigm. So anyway, I'm worried today about feminism as equivalence to men and any metric there's a quality based on what is, because we need to lead the exodus. So our plan should be get the hell out of a system that's not working in the name of one that works for everybody, not sit there and hate on men who've kind of met part of their knowledge limit and blame them that they aren't more. Because that's really what we're doing. We're blaming men for not solving the problems they can't solve. It's not in their nature. So anyway, I'm very worried today about us not being a creative movement and an intellectual movement, and instead just being in the comparison and reduction movement. So.
Well, I definitely can see that. And I have to say, in the time that I've spent with you, myself, I've learned so much. And in my professional career, there have been many moments where I have felt like I didn't sort of see the picture the same way my male colleagues did, and I had something very unique to bring, but had trouble articulating it. So, I love that you are now giving us the tools, the language to help us show up better as uniquely what we can contribute. So, and even I will speak for those of you out there that are mothers. I have a couple of daughters, and I now see them very differently. These girls are brilliant, and the range of data that they perceive and understand and the way they see the world is really amazing. And so, I'm here and involved because I see the potential upside in both business as a professional and even as, a human and raising other little beings and other girls. So, but I want to talk a little bit, Heidi, I'd like to hear, back to sort of saving the planet. We know we're facing some big problems, and you said at the beginning, all those problems can be solved, and with this intelligence and these tools. So maybe can you talk to us a little bit about that and shed some light on how we got here and, maybe what led you to the Girl-Approved experiment?
All right, so I'm going to do a little bit of history because I feel like part of the problem is we're missing a little bit of scientific history. And without that, we'll never really understand what went wrong, really. All right. So you can't understand women's position or potential, or even all of humans' position and potential, if you only look at the world in the last 100 years, or through the eyes of corporatism and corporate hierarchy, which is a very modern concept. And a failing one, which seems to be making people miserable, frankly. And so I'd like to back up a little bit and give you a little history on the concept of SMART and what we mean when we say SMART, okay? And I have to look at my notes for this. And so, all right. So if we back it up, and let's going to back it up like 5,000 years. Okay, so if we really want to understand where we're at, we have to see where some things went wrong. So one of the universal stories that you're going to hear, if you look to any, deeply into the cultural heritage of, it's one of those universal stories, there's going to be some notion that humanity lived in a higher state and that things were more at balance. And it might be referred to as an Eden, or every different culture has some word for it. And then, we lose something and humanity is blinded. So this kind of takes us back, as it's the old narratives, like thousands of years. Well, what happened? All right. Well, here's my version of it now that I couldn't have given you. But basically, if you're looking at what belief systems guided human progress, and who did we look to? Who were the wisest of the lands that could point the direction of a country, or as a family, a nation, as an individual, as to what to aspire to, what codes to live by, what would produce the best impact as a family or as a society. If you look back in time, it used to be the people we trusted were they were the spiritual, artistic people. And these people they had visions, and they were considered the most knowing of all, like the gift due to humanity. And so you would have the knights and the queens, everybody would surround themselves and wait for these visionaries to point the directions. And over time, those people, which were the hashtag art, science, spiritual, or visionalists, these were challenged. And they were challenged with something which would become modern science. And if you ask the older people that we used to trust, they were often they spoke about being like gifted, some vision came to them. And so they saw themselves channelers of some universals that would come to them from within. And so if you're looking at the Da Vinci's or any of these great minds, were they artists, scientists? It was one big, blur, but they were the visionaries. And then when science came around, and it was because in that sort of situation, you could get a lot of sort of ill-intended psychos, stepped up and started promoting their talents and that were setting humanity in the wrong direction. So then the scientists come along, and it really is a huge shift in who we look to for guidance. Where we had one is the internal truth is within people. The scientists came along and they wanted to democratize truth, so there was no gifted person they had to listen to, because the last thing we want is to be controlled by some false prophet sending humanity in the wrong direction. So what happened was these group came along, and the scientific method was really like, how do we create a system by we know these people who say they're connected to nature are really speaking the truth. And so ironically, it all comes down to the fact that those people were able to create a formal process by which they could democratize truth. And all of that came from giving a language to what they called the external senses. So we had two divisions. We had the artists, the people moved from within, and they had these visions, and the visions created art, these eurekas. And then we had the move without. And it's like they were documenting patterns and mathematics that they could sense with their outside senses and duplicate, and they could have tested by third parties. So people really, really understand that there was a shift in society in what we valued. And from that point, the artist who was once the center, and the seers and the poets who would speak to some other universals, they fell to the wayside. And what we thought, and then suddenly we're marketing, the only people to trust are the people, the real scientists, and if you can't see it with your outside senses and model it, it's not real, it's up for question, all right? And really what this is going to parallel is a division between two parts of the brain. And why this is important is that this set humanity on what it thought to be a course upward, and it has hit a wall. So since the scientific method, which were really the truth is outward team, because what can happen, the men couldn't model the truth within. So the artists and scientists were moved by something that they couldn't articulate, so they all got fired, out the door, no data, no deal. So we got the outward team, and now they created their algorithms and their data, and they start to modernize modern technology. So what has governed human progress since the scientific method were the outies, all right? The truth is on the out, and all our technology is outward looking. The problem with this, what's that?
No, I was just going to ask a question, because I think, you're talking about, like, there's internal truth and then there's external truth. There's internal understanding and then there's, the understanding of the external world. So can you tell us how that links to sort of smarts and the brains and intelligence? Is that where you're going next?
When I'm saying smart, that's what I'm saying. I'm saying, who do you trust? What belief system? Who do we look to? Who's giving the TED Talks of yesteryear? All right. Now, all of the TED Talks are made up. Who are the New York Times bestsellers? And there's a shift in who we trust from the innies to the outies. And we have to realize this is a huge shift in society. All right. This is like earth shattering. So when I'm saying smart, the modern understanding today of smart and intelligence has really shifted today more and more through the scientists and then through the technologists. All right. But the problem is, so these are all the outward things that we can model and count. That's all. So the problem is that all of these outie people that thought they were democratizing truth and that was the way to progress, now we get to the fact that this is modern science. At the end of the day, all that modern science could model ends up being about 4%. So if you said, here's all what nature equals, the more they use their outward senses, they start to identify this field called quantum physics. And at the end of the day, the best that they can describe about nature or human nature is only 4%. So I had the benefit of knowing that trying to fit into a scientific paradigm, which is 4%, is not very aspirational, but it gets worse. So given this model, which now we say, technology and data, this model of what is and who could be, they start to use it to define everything, like what we should learn, why we feel a certain way, what our kids should become, what is efficient, what is growth. And we have to realize that all the modern definitions we're using have been put not through the full picture, but through this instrument, this reality, 4% reality box. And that's, and one that science itself is recognizing is broken. That you can't even, so if we're standing here and we're gonna idealize a system, we have to realize that a current concept of SMART, as defined by the scientists, which then dribbled into every dimension of culture and measurement and efficiency and potentiality and research, gives us 4%.
So, Heidi, what I find fascinating is that you are referring that everything that human nature knows so far is 4%. Is scientifically. So then what's happening to the 96%? What's that?
Okay, now we're going to move. But I needed to hammer that in. And I want to say one last thing. Even worse. So as what we call rational or logical even is on 4%. Okay? So we're like 4% rational or 4% logical. And I want to, so fortunately, thankfully, I spent some time at Princeton, and I want to let you guys know, at Princeton, one of the most important proofs that came from working with Einstein, Turing invented the computer, it's total incomplete. Basically, they show, if we say our outside senses, this little 4% box is all there is of the human mind, they literally proved that system would collapse in air. That if we modeled life as the brain, the living brain, as a system, without connecting to another system, that system would eventually not know what was true and false, and it would start to decay. So this is setting a tone for where we're at today. So the one last thing I'm going to say is that system does not understand one critical thing, which is what it means to be alive. And this is where AI starts, okay? So this 4% system can only model the physical body. The moment that you have a brain in that body, that system falls apart because they recognize that the moment you're thinking, you're changing everything in the environment. So basically, man's best so far in science's technology has given us a 4% approximation and causal description of nature, including human nature, and it works totally awesome as long as we're not thinking. So they modeled the world of the physical dead, which is a start, but we're a living system. So the moment you have something living, there are forces driving that have nothing to do with what they've been able to model with our outside senses. So as I say, wind does not blow the human hand to the buy button. There are more forces. 96% of something is out there that we don't know about. So to think that we're going to build markets on 4% that doesn't understand what it means to be alive is absurd. You know? And in the absence of not understanding being alive, we've dictated what this has become. So I guess we can move to the next section.
Yeah, so Heidi, I was going to ask you, so this 4% world, where do women fit in? And, are we part of the 96?
Where do we fit into that? Well, because this is the problem. We're suckers. So The fact is we don't. And the thing is, and this is going to lead a little bit to my girl-approved experiment, is that making matters even worse. I say that the biggest problem today isn't being a physical slave, it's being a mind slave. And that is, we're agreeing to things without testing them that are literally making us owned by bad belief systems. So we were not participants in the foundation of the scientific method. And so really what it was a male-developed peers review group. So basically, all we know is what the male mind as an instrument could model in nature. This had nothing to do with what we could model, but instead of us exploring what man modeled, what we could model, we just desperately tried to learn what he did, as opposed to saying, I had nothing to do with that 4%, okay? And that's kind of creating a lot of economic, social problems. So that's not my science. I can appreciate some of it, but to take it as our capability was us volunteering that we are no more than what man is, which is kind of ridiculous if we want to call ourselves free women. So we're not part of that unless we agree to it. I guess that's the answer.
Yeah, so maybe help us understand this a little bit more and how the 4 and the 96 connects back to our intelligence and getting into your girl-approved experiment.
All right, and then I'll give that, and then I can go through the little slides about that. So let me check one thing. Laura, you take it over. Okay, all right, so wait, not yet, okay. So here's the thing. You hear all of this I learned by being at Princeton. And I learned it for a few reasons. I learned it because as sort of a female studying quantum physics and AI, I could solve problems really easily that the men couldn't. And instead of me thinking, what's wrong with me, I was like, how the hell can't you know that? So I didn't, repeatedly, I saw not only that I could solve problems, but that unfortunately science doesn't just stay in the ivory towers, that I could see them not understanding things and then going out and making technologies that were harmful. So I saw unintended consequences. And I also saw them missing global opportunity. So I started to see two things, is that I could sense things that men couldn't. And then I could also see, because I didn't sense things, that they would go out and make very dangerous contributions to medicine, etc. So this became very interesting to me. Now, at the same time, Einstein and Tesla all had quotes out about how they believed that the woman mind would open new frontiers of science, but if we followed the male system, we would be less than the male. So I had a lot of encouragement in this environment to explore why it was I could solve these hard problems that the men felt were very difficult. And I'm not special, I just literally, it was can't you see this? As though I had an extra eye on me that they were missing. It wasn't I slaved away. So this question of, is the male and the female instrument the same instrument? Basically, is he, let's say, maybe a telescope looking outward? Are we more a microscope looking inward? Are we picking up on the same range of information as he is? So where the girl-approved experiment starts is ironically where feminism should have started and where we're not encouraged to, because girl-approved experiment wasn't saying, how do I get them to think I'm smart? No. Okay? All the men are bored with the 4% anyway, so why get that approval? They're seeking new foundations. It was about asking, it was like job performance review, all right? Look, you guys have had 5,000 years to get your shit together and work it out, and so far what you got is 4 here, and what it looks like is it's like creating a lot of shit, and there was a lot of shame at Princeton because they were deeply involved in bombs. So that's my legacy. I'm not here worshiping you men here. You made some boo-boos, okay? So for me, I dare to ask is, can women, do we know something by birthright? And is that something foundational to going beyond the four, eliminating some of these unintended consequences, and maybe actually inventing things that aren't destructive, like bombs and shit, or wars or video games that seem to be making our kids go crazy. So anyway, so the girl-approved experiment to me was what no one is giving girls permission to do today, which is advance the system, maybe challenge it, maybe revolutionize it, maybe point out its foibles. And ironically, no one's funding that. No one wants to fund a girl evaluating the system. Everybody is desperately figuring out how to shove us in that four. And this is what pisses me off today, okay? So Girl Approved couldn't raise any money, even though we had all these men think it was awesome, because that would be the most disruptive thing possible if you were a woman, and most idealized thing possible if you were a man. So every freaking Elon Musk unicorn, they're like, go challenge the system, disrupt. But then the bloody freaking feminists are like, fit in, be boss bitch of the dying four. This is ridiculous. So anyway, we had to fund ourselves, and I had to show that's the point of the Girl Approved experiment and the word Girl Approved, which is, it meant, according to my instrument, not according to the laws as you gave us of what is truth and not truth, according to what you could sense, i.e. the scientific method, or your spiritual practices. What was it that the female, as an instrument, defined by us, using us, knows? So what the Girl Approved experiment was about is girls coming together from all around the world, not assuming that just because he said X, X is all there is, or X is absolutely true. It was actually us exploring the organic capabilities of perception, creation, language, discernment, prophecy of our own brains, okay? And I had to work with girls because it felt like the more the women got in the system, the more they were desperate to seek approval of that dying force system. I didn't need its approval. So this is the beginning of an experiment that I started with artists because I felt like they were highly perceptive. I was going back to the missing component, and all around the world, starting in New York, starting with ghetto girls, actually, from the high school. And I just put out an ad. I'm like, are you seeing problems everywhere that you think you can fix? Like, does something tell you this? And it begins a 12-year experiment into exploring what the female mind is truly capable of knowing, if not conditioned or owned by what we were told we could know. All right? And that's what that experiment is about. And it ended up solving something very profound, which we can now move into. What's the next section? Am I answering your questions, Laura?
Yeah, well, yeah, I think to hear a little bit more about what you discovered with the Girl Approved experiment, but I'm also curious to, so there are two things. One, why did you use the word girl? And two, how does this connect back to sort of our brains and our intelligence and how men think versus how you discovered women think?
All right, so the reason I used the word girl, and then I can go into the brains concept, was because, again, unlike the men who seem to give themselves permission to explore new frontiers, it felt that the more the women were, adult women were moving into the system, they became very shut down and they sought acceptance and compliance. And so I felt like we were losing something that was both a capability and a confidence in our own gender. So I felt that I just couldn't, the teammates that felt that they knew more and weren't willing to surrender their entire identities over to men were the younger girls. And the older women were just like, that's the way it has to be. They were the ones telling me to shut up and just like suck up to the men. And I'm like, hell no, he's got unintended consequences. So it was them that both seemed to have the skill, the ready, willing, and able. and own themselves independent of men. So that's why I had to go to them. So
help us understand this now. Tell us more about how this connects to sort of
The
intelligence, the brain left, the male intelligence versus female, and kind of some of that you discovered in the girl group experiment too.
Alrighty, cool. All right, so we will now move to the brains. Can y'all see that? Can you see that, Laura? All right, there's a slide, and it says the brains, and it's got 2 numbers on it. And if you notice, it says plural, and that's on purpose. So basically, yay, guess what? We don't have a brain. We have 2 brains. We actually have 4, but the other ones are dominated by the left side. So what I want to say is that we've heard the concept of the brain all the time, and it's like they present it like the lungs, like we have these 2 parallel equal things doing the same thing. It's like a backup system. That's not what's happening, all right? That there is 2 parts of our mind with very little communication, and these 2 parts of the mind are modeling fundamentally different parts of nature. They tell different stories. They speak a different language. They're governed by different mathematics, all right? It is not that we have one unit. And one can relate to the external world as we know it in the language of time and space, and we created modern science as we know it, all right? But there's a whole other, that's that 4, and we have this whole other dimension that we have yet to deploy. And so what we're going to get to is to be GIRLSMART is to actually activate the other dimension, not in a philosophical, emotional way, but as a piercing, accurate tool of understanding cause and effect and creation in the same way that men made modern engineering and modern economics, but with a lot more precision because it understands nature. So everything about reality today, science and society that we built in modern is literally built on the left side, the left hemisphere. So if you think about science, you can call it 4% science. If you think about our concept of liberation, we got 4%. And unfortunately, this 4% outward, we've been trapped in that. And we're still, so that when you think of the system, think about one part of the human instrument turned into a mathematics, turned into a bunch of theories and books and Harvard, and they're like, that's how it is. And now we're women are like fighting to be part of that. That's the 4% left brain. Again, what was created by that is a dead head. It only our physical bodies as basically, that's why in the comatose state, we'd almost be the same identical thing. They have no concept of what is driving our life energy, what is driving our choices, the activity in the brain. So 4% is a dead head. And hence why we're kind of acting like zombies, and we're very fascinated by zombie world, because a dead head is not developing thinking. It is being programmed only by what is put into it, all right? So the problem with the dead head, it's like a blank computer. So their model of the human today is a thinking, non-thinking blank computer who is only a mirroring its environment. Now, why is this bad? It means we're owned. And just as a side note, all the leading people in neuroscience and quantum physics already know this. And under the, and they're meeting with the Dalai Lama and they're meeting with the Vatican. So the scientists in the know have already kind of given up on this left brain thing as the answers, and they're meeting with all the men in the spiritual realm. But unfortunately, that's still man-on-man action. No, we're not part of that. So anyway, why is this bad for business? Well, because it's really hijacked what we know is who we are. And unfortunately, we as women and as a society have internalized This is all you're capable of. This is what you need to do to be happy. And unfortunately, we've been programmed to believe that's our full potential. And so we're acting like the very non-thinking creatures that they told us they were. And not only that, we're acting like his laws came from God proper. And I have this thing, it's called Some Dude Made It Up. And so you have to realize that everything in culture, even our scientific tools, were made up as someone's best effort. But we as women act like they're immutable. You know, they're like, they're as true as gravity. Well, we're not, no, they're not the laws of nature. And no, God did not come down and say, be a boss bitch, babe. These are constructions from this 4% that are highly flawed. So 96 gives what? Gives life. 96 is going to tell us what our destiny is. And I can compare it to a science that tells you why an apple falls from a tree at a certain rate, gravity, but can't tell you why the seed of an apple knows in its soul to drive to find dirt and to become an apple tree. So one, the left side is just physical external forces and external truths. The right side is the information which is driving us to become and unfold into our real potential and how to interact with the environment to do so. All right? This is a really big missing class of information, particularly for culture, particularly for being your best self, particularly for marketing and economics. All right? And if we're going to ask, who am I? What do we need as humans to thrive? Okay? These questions are not really something we can answer with our left brain, other than the fact that we need the most basic food and cover. But beyond a moment of starvation, we all go in, you start making it up because all of that data is in a right brain. And unless we access that, if you can't understand who I am and what I need, or what you can't answer what we have in common with others, how on earth could you ever create a market demand with any integrity? Any integrity. So if you're going to say we want to be brands for good and purpose and value, where's that coming from? According to who? According to what smart definition? And if that smart definition is not Mother Nature, then it means we're owned by something that somebody else made up. And likely it's not going to be in our best interest. And what I'd like to say is that we as women might own the pocketbook, but we don't own our mind. So for me, the right data, and this is really why all the spiritual men are going, scientific men are going back to the spiritual community and saying, what do you know? Okay, this is the big mother load of business intelligence, design intelligence, human unity. It's what we have in common. It's the way to realign economic growth with human evolution. And remember, the concept of the free market was built on the concept of a free being. And even Adam Smith said you can't have a free being without, when he said a spiritual foundation. What he meant is that you had to know we're more than these physical beings and the data that's in our outside world. So I want to say something really quickly about how the different parts of the brain learn differently. The exterior brain, the physical brain or material brain, is very vulnerable because it only learns through repetition. So if you repeat something in the outside world enough, it's called the brain fires. And there's a slogan, what fires together wires together. So as we're interacting with our outside world, the problem is that the outside world can make a lot of fake patterns. I mean, Twitter's a great example. You can put out a bad message and you can see it in 20 different feeds. The left brain has no discernment of if that is true or false. So just by repetition, it's a sucker. It's a dead brain. Where the right brain has a higher level knowing about judging the information and the integrity of it. So if you go back to a market, basically what they're trying to say, unless we were also grounded in they called the hidden hand of Mother Nature, who had our better interest, who knew what we needed to be alive, you can't, the concept of free market is stupid, because all we're taught is what is given to us in repetition from like a child, and so we're owned. And that becomes why the markets become sick. The concept of free market is critical. The concept of capitalism is correct. But you can't have that. Those concepts, the more and more we shoved everything into this dead science world, the more women were like, sure, I need that. Then we created sort of a whole sick system. So basically, what did the Girl Approved experiment do is that, again, the men gave up. They're like, we can't crack those codes. Except the spiritual world always talked about a universal language, like a Babel, the higher. So what did the girls and I do? By studying our brains and observing, and we actually recognized that we were picking up on all this other information, and yet we'd never written it down. And so the right brain speaks a different language. And if you notice that anytime there was like witches, anytime women gathered, there's many encounters, they would say, oh, they speak in tongues. So all throughout history, you might notice that, you know, this concept of women babbling or scaring of uttering of words. And the fact is that when women get together, their average woman senses information. She's experiencing reality very intimately with far more reach of interconnectivity. And they start to develop a communication. And we're forming links very rapidly. And the thing is that what we never did is much like men did is sit down and give that a formal linguistic structure. And then when you give it a language, you can start to model even mathematically or behaviorally other forms that are influencing your choices. And you can start to actually correct some of the bad data from the left side. So what we did is we found that, in fact, we could use the right brain as a profound instrument, a profound scientific tool, and reactivate what we really were experiencing, give it a formal language so we could actually communicate to men. So now, instead of left brain science and left brain engineering and left brain economics, we literally could bring these two together. And so it was like man had this higher system because most of them were left brain dominated. Now, everybody has left and right brain, 100%. But what I'm saying is the spiritual men, remember who got all fired? It's because they couldn't sense things at the very next level to put it at the level of specificity that the men could with the right brain. So we found a way, all these artists, it's like a lost language. And if you go back to all the ancient time, and even go back to the things like the Bible, they talked about word. It's all about the difference between word spoken and word of God, and not word of God, word of nature. So just think, giving a language to all that information, our brilliant brains were developed to communicate and know, so that we make, as people, as a collective society, as a business, decisions that are going to optimize life. Not optimize dead, optimize life, okay? So then what you're going to understand is there's so much deeper things driving our decisions. But unfortunately, we've created a world where we don't know how to fit in and own that part of ourselves. So what we as women and even as humans are doing is, in order to fit into the 4% world, we literally have to disconnect from our minds, and hence lose our minds. And why is which puts ourselves in profound anxiety and tension, which we don't know how to articulate. So if you notice, the more everything's becoming digital, the more we're going crazy, literally, because you cannot something had to go. So you can't agree to the rules of the system and be a full functioning brain. And so the beautiful thing is, not only were we able to find this language, But then we were able to turn back to the tools of design, the tools of research, the tools of forecasting, and all these different tools, even technology, and show that you could extend them to add this other 96 in. So first we had to 96 our own machine, the human instrument, and so we could sit there and really own that. Then we had to fix the tools that were made, that we're using every day to create this culture and the definitions. And then we showed when you added them together, that everything you produced should be of service to humanity. And that everything was a tipping point. And that most of the financial waste that we have, and most of the unintended consequences, and most of the things that we create that are leading to mental or physical sickness wouldn't have been happening in the first place. So you can't have a big business. And what we're looking at is, do we have a bad data problem? And that is manifested in ourselves and in everything in the world. And so it's not about change. You have to leave this paradigm to really fix this. So, all right, I'll stop for a second, Laura.
I really do love this. I said earlier, and I'll say it again, it's quite profound. And what one of your slides said, economic growth and human evolution can now be a partnered team when you deploy this 96 intelligence. And it's also thrilling to me because, as I spoke earlier, there were moments as a professional in business where I would feel like we were headed on a bad path or a dangerous path, or there was tension in the decision we were making, but I couldn't quite describe why. And now I'm like, oh, okay, I wasn't crazy. This was my right brain kind of starting to talk to me and give me some information to help me lead my teams and make better decisions. And, we brought Heidi in to do a right brain activation workshop with my team, which was very enlightening. And I think, there's just such potential here for women. This is how we free our minds, liberating the female mind around the world for, tremendous growth in all things is just, it's incredible. And I think, you said at the beginning, this is a rally cry. And for me now, it's very clear why this is a rally cry and why we women really have to come together and start to author and shape the next frontiers of growth, because it's within us that can really happen. So I guess my last question for you, Heidi, and then we'll turn it over. Some people I think we've got a question on the chat, but just what's next? What's next? And then we'll close with that, and then we'll turn it over we'll open it up for Q&A.
All right. So it's funny, like if I'm going to be selfish, Heidi, I just like inventing stuff. And I had to, but one of the things we needed inventing to be better inventors was new tools, including a reboot of this instrument called me, and so I really first thought that, okay, all I'm going to do is prove that girls are smart on our own, and there's a GIRLSMART, and then I'll just work with girls and we'll get busy fixing things. But as I see this world today collapsing around us, and as I see with politics, I see more and more that I must teach everybody this. And they give them their birthright back, because we're all pieces of unutilized technology. And I certainly can't solve all these problems if I'm using my full brain with all these instruments. I'm going to get a crumb done before I'm dead. But what I can do is teach as many people as possible, so y'all can go into your own corners and get busy. And so to me, there's a couple different levels, is that we as women are any man too, because men are speaking up all over. Before women, men are the ones that teach me my full brain, give it to me, wanting this. From the dawn of time that they've looked to join these forces. But every decision we make, from where do I go to school, who am I, what do I need, your kid's decision, who to date, if you don't own your mind and reclaim that, they are all influenced by patterns that are not in your best interest. So on a first level, just personally, and believe me, it's like I am not that old, weak person. On every level, I've made bad choices. But first is we as women need to do that, just to become our best self is not 4%. So And the other is to not force children anymore, particularly girls, to have to be boys. It is destroying them. And so we don't have a dream gap, we have a truth gap. And no man can give it to us, okay? It is us to find our potential and how that manifests. So the first one is, I want to get and achieve rights and give this back to every woman. This is how we end inequality this year. Done this year. All right? It's not by the World Economic Forum ain't got nothing that's going to do this except women reclaiming who they are, because that changes the numbers entirely. But more important, I don't give a shit about numbers. It has how we wake up and feel about ourselves. And we can't be equal in metrics of 4. All we could do is lose ourselves and feel shitty and end up fighting with each other. So number 1, activate every female. That's equality. It's done. Done. That will already prevent an immune system of the mind so much of the rising mental illness. You should be mental. It's a sign you're healthy. You cannot feel sane in the system. It is not permitting this. Number 1. The next group are the culture makers. So whoever's out there who wants to influence culture, A, know your instrument as a woman. B, learn how this is going to change the tools and the definitions of economic growth. That's a whole different definition. Engineering, research, objectivity, creative optimization. Almost everything we create is an impact on what we become. We can share that and figure and change these metrics. This is the missing metrics and the missing data. It doesn't exist in what is. So the next set is whoever wants to be a culture maker, activate your instrument first, learn these tools. And the final is learn how to bring them together. And that's what Girl Approved is practice. I showed that teenage girls could outperform any system out there. All right, they didn't go to college yet. So this is our capability. 1, self. How can this group get a platform together so every bloody girl out there knows this? 2, the next level for whoever wants to influence culture and metrics and the UN, whatever. Learn how this expanding our understanding of nature changes all of those tools so that they serve nature. All right? Not an agenda, but serves Mother Nature, the ultimate babe boss bitch who believes in us and gave us a goddamn amazing instrument that we've thrown away. All right? And then the last is makers. And, and that's really where we're the unicorn tipping points. And the men that have done it have always had that balance of the brain, but they trusted the other part could actualize it or mobilize it or operationalize it. So these are the 3 levels. And I think this is to me, it's the first time I really shared a larger story in the public. Ground zero, there's some women out there, but this is on us now. You can't say you don't know, all right? So any one of you goes out to try to fit into what is, there's no money, they're running out of the money, and you can't do it without doing harm. But if you can give metrics to what is good and you can go to the new frontiers, it's where every man is looking. He ain't looking in his rear mirror. So, Laura, you can say some of that more. Gosh, I probably didn't say this practically. We want to teach all of this. So maybe you can give it a practical answer. Okay. Oh, you're not your client? Yeah, okay.
Okay. There's the desire to teach the public at large, which is what you said, right? So you're starting a campaign to raise money to get the content created to be able to deploy this to the masses. So those of you that are on the phone, if you want to get involved in that, there's an opportunity to do so. And then the second thing is, I'll talk about Bear a little bit. And I said that we did a workshop, but, she said the makers, you got to teach the makers, but the makers also have to start practicing. So once you learn this, you learn a lot of it through the practice, and it takes time. And so, creating a bunch of Team 96 folks out there, we're doing that at Bayer, trying to become our own Team 96 so that we, within the space of healthcare, start to create things that are going to really help people and unlock new frontiers and new growth. So, that's also a second space. There's the public program, but then there's the makers, the Team 96 program, where, Heidi's doing some work for us to help us learn how to use our right brains. And, that's an opportunity, too, for those of you on the phone to think about as well.
there's a lot of the women out there, and you want to be entrepreneurs and create your own big business. And what these tools are is a mechanism to find a truly big business, not what we think is good, but what is good according to the laws of nature. And if you align yourself with the forces of nature, guess, like engineering deploys the forces of nature, okay? Why is it powerful? Because it knows how to leverage them. So all of you could work together, we could work together to make sure that what you're creating is benefiting from the forces of nature. That's why it will grow. And doing good because it is lined with where humans' potentiality is. And so that's an innovation, you know, and it's a difference. And by the way, everything that came out of that combination is a tipping point because you're waking up another level of life. Like, it's like where water wants to flow. You're not fighting that gravity. And so it's like every product lights a new spark up in human energy is literally what it does. So that's what we end up showing is that the big business that did the ultimate growth because it was doing the ultimate good because it was working with Mother Nature. And you don't have to lie to keep it going. And it's just where nature wants to flow.
Heidi, this is Laura, and I think you also need to mention that you have been hired by the biggest companies in the world as a marketing consultant and been extremely successful because you had spark your right side of the brain. I think this is very important on the practice.
Oh, yeah, this is all tested. I didn't speak up. Like, the reason we won the MIT Future of Artificial Intelligence was actually adding actual new intelligence based on this, but we didn't even do it before. We had to show that you could invent, that there was an untapped tipping point in every industry. There's market disruption, and we proved all of this. We have this, I mean, if you come to the training, you can go through thousands of documented exhibitions and examples. So of preventing waste and harm and activating growth that does good. So this is not, I'm an engineer, this is not theory. This is a new practice, and it shows how what we create creates us. So let's be that to our own demise or to our own elevation. So yeah, and remember, if you want a global market, if you want a mass market, the bigger you want of a market, the more you have to understand nature. They're infinitely connected. If I want to know to make a difference, I have to know more human needs. That means I have to understand nature better. You know, so there's a profound connection between true science understanding nature and nature's directions for expansion and what you make. They're completely the same thing. And a marketing without an understanding of what it means to be alive, design without an understanding of what it means to be alive, it's a crapshoot. It's a fake field. So yes, we've tested this all. I was very thorough, and I met, hundreds of male scientists, many Nobel laureates, many of the most famous spiritual leaders, and none of them can disagree because they always knew something was missing. And ironically, they've always believed it had something to do with women. And that's why they keep calling it the new feminine frontier. But if we let man define the feminine frontier, joke's on us, honestly. Remember, we, in the tree of knowledge, spoke to the woman, not to the man. In Eden, Eve, yeah. She was the original spark, yes.
And Heidi, maybe you can mention that you're creating this course, and how long would a course for women, the Be Women would exist? Because you have different courses for young females, for girls that are 6 or 10 to 18. And
no, what I decided I wanted to do after a lot of consideration, and honestly, y'all should know that I have so many, like MIT, Stanford, like all those men professors, they're all like, I can't wait to become GIRLSMART. It's honestly, my battle's gonna be women. They're so excited because it's like new data. So I believe that we need one course, and this is a group assignment, okay? Because now you know, it's not my fault. I'm not the only one that knows, okay? So I believe we need one course, and it takes about 3 months of practice to start to set the internal fire of the mind. They've already proven that. It's like why they have a 12-step. So I think there has to be one course, like Ground Zero, the brains for women. And then I have another one for men because they have to learn slightly different. And this is the beginning of the first unification of women because it gives us a language by which to bond to that is deeper. The human experience is deeper than any culture. It's not the skin. It's deeper of human experience, human knowledge deeper than our culture, deeper than anything we've learned, that which we have. So I think that one is, it has to be the 3 months of practice, but really what we're doing is that's the great exodus out of what you want to call patriarchy. But remember, men don't express it.
How many hours a week would it be, this course? Because we are all interested in taking it, and we'll definitely have to arrange a way that we're like 600 women in this network, and I'm sure within a few months will be a lot more. So
I mean, it's a way, what I want to say is like, it's a beginning of a way of living, all right? And the first is with yourself. So it is a life-opening practice, but it's a difference between thinking of your life as a bunch of bones, and then you get, and you're pretty, and you're just your body, and then you start the dying path. It really shows that the human is supposed to be an enlightenment, upward, perpetual journey. So this gets you off the time-space dying over the hump, and you're on your way out to the beginning of enlivening. And what they really already showed is that this thinking can reverse. It actually makes your DNA stronger. It makes your physical immune system longer. It actually reverses Alzheimer's, and Alzheimer's is because we're not using our brain. So beginning of becoming is a lifelong journey. And it's literally the link now between the mind and the DNA is stronger. The mind controls the DNA. So it's like we're trying to strap on the creams and the body surgery. It turns out that this is the fountain of youth is your own damn head. So it's a beginning of practice, and it will become an ever-growing. But what it is it's an exodus out of the damn 4%, where women have to compete in a system that's shit for everybody. And even as we grow, then take men with us, So it's a life beginning. Now, whether you choose, and think about a new microscope on life. And then it's the beginning of women sharing all over what they're seeing. If every woman had no microscope and every woman got one, and she was looking at different topics, it's a beginning of like, oh my God, it's a beginning of coming alive again. Because it's not just you. As we start to apply this information to different things in life and we share that, this is the missing intelligence in life. That's the network of women sharing like bacteria that we've stopped doing. And that's women's circles where the keepers. So it is a beginning. That's how I see it. But you have to sort of learn the foundations and learn how to practice it till those little wires start waking up again.
Thank you. We are out of time now. I think that we'll have to wrap up, but Laura and Heidi, can you give us just a few closing words so that we can close this call with your closing wisdom, and then we'll definitely have to call you again for another call so that we can really get this course going for many of us who want to take it.
Okay, Laura, I spoke enough. Yes, Laura?
Yeah, I think, for me, this is, I hope you guys are as excited as I am. As a business leader, and I said earlier, as a parent, this understanding that what we have within our own minds is the key to getting humanity, the planet, economics, all of it back on track again. That's extraordinary. And, I often think about what's the change on the world that I can have, and what's the legacy I'm going to leave behind. And I think, man, if I can be part of something like this, that would be huge. That would be huge. And I think the world needs us. It needs women. It needs this intelligence. And, you know, I would just say, please come join us and be part of the liberation of the female mind, you know, to sort of change the world. And I think, you know, there's application to it for all facets of life, no matter what you do and what business you're in and who you are as a person. I think you can learn and grow in a very big way from getting involved.
Wow. And that's a beautiful thing I want to say is that I think women are done. It's not that they're at home. There's part of the female nature that wants to be participating in bigger narratives. Everybody's a truth-seeking, creative individual that hasn't been activated. And what excites me is that women could be at home around the kitchen table like we used to, using our minds to explore hard questions and solve them. It's not about that we had to sit in a special office around a special table. That was made up. So I think that excites me is that we're such an undervalued species. And as women, we have a very special duty now. And I think we can actually, and it's time to, you know, spark that. And it's very learnable and practical. Right, you know, and if you want money, oh yeah, you're the unicorn, sister. But it's not about women forcing ourselves with a lot of attitude and posturing in what is. That's the most important thing. That system is dead and done, and the men are getting out of it. So, you know, we got bigger dreams. So.
Thank you. This has been really amazing. I mean, I think that everybody here has had is on fire, and I think there's a lot food for thought and lot to discuss, and we will definitely be bringing this up on our monthly call on the 7th of February. We meet as a group to discuss where we're going next. And there's a lot. We would really like to have a course for all our Be Women, because we need to be enlightened and fast, because according to the World Economic Forum, we're going backwards.
No, we are. Remember I told you the go to link complete. They predicted it already, and it's happening. It's already, it's a wonder proof out of the Institute of Advanced Research. So
they say that we have more than 3 generations before there will be equality between men and women, and we don't want to wait as Be Women. We want to really move forward towards a care economy. So on that note, I want to say that today, actually 2 days ago, we had our first Be Women Rome meeting. It was fantastic, incredible imaginal cells energy. Today, in a few hours, we have over 80 Be Women in Milano. So Italy is really rocking. And regarding the upcoming webinars we have, they are all one better than the other. They're all weekly, or sometimes we have 2 a week. The next one is on the 4th of February, SDG Action Manager. It's a new tool that will help companies measure their action towards the Sustainable Development Goals, by Laura Vélez and Laura Palmeiro. The first one is from B-Lab, the other one is from UN Global Compact. Then we have a course by Priscilla Zamora on unconscious bias. Then by Sergio Vera, the principles of a purposeful life. And another amazing call will be by Adriana Marini, the CEO of Animana, one of the most sustainable fashion companies there is in the world, with her NGO called Hecho por Nosotros. Again, we also have Daniela Cox, that is an expert on sustainable tourism. You will blow your mind what she's done so far. And we have amazing courses, webinars coming up. So I hope you can all join us in the next few weeks. And thank you again, Heidi and Laura, for this amazing, really inspiring call. And so we will definitely be connecting with Heidi and Laura again for our group. So thank you very much. And don't
look at girlsmart.school if you want to just follow us. I don't want to be followed. Engage. So look me up on LinkedIn. Reach out. Let's make this ground zero